Okay, everybody, we'll get started. Welcome this Monday morning to our Mailman Center Innovation and Connection webinar. I'm Shelley Bear, and I work at the Mailman Center as the Director of Leadership Training Initiatives. We have an exciting morning planned. Our topic is love, sex, and disability across the lifespan, promoting sexual well-being and healthy relationships in our youth. We have two topics today and two well-known speakers in the community. The first will be from Lourdes Rios, talking about social language skills and techniques. And our second topic is Having the Talk with Dr. Marilyn Voker. So we have an exciting morning planned for you. I'd like to share some thoughts and some context to set the stage regarding this really important topic. All right, well, I have a really cool quote that comes after this, and it says, young people are sexual beings, regardless of whether or not they have a disability. All people need affection, love, intimacy, acceptance, and companionship. I would like to add to this quote that all people with disabilities are capable of having sex, whatever that may look like, and are capable of sexual intimacy. I grew up with a physical, visible disability, so this topic is really close to my heart. As my colleagues and friends know, this topic is my thing, so I'm down anytime you want to talk about sex. I'm thrilled that Mailman Center is addressing this important, often neglected topic of sexual health for youth and young adults with disabilities. Sexual health and education is still considered a taboo subject, and it's even more taboo in the disability community. Where are youth with disabilities learning about sex? In Dade County Public School System, sex education is being brought back into the curriculum. This is good news. But what about the youth and young adults with disabilities? There are approximately 36,000 children in ESE classes in our schools. That's about 10% of the student population. Due to the lack of knowledge about sexual health, individuals with disabilities are at greater risk of sexual abuse, exploitation, unwanted pregnancies, and STDs. Many teens with disabilities lack the knowledge needed to develop a healthy sexual identity, increasing their vulnerability. There is a lot of data around this. People with disabilities still experience the highest rates of mental, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. I'm a clinical social worker and work with youth and young adults here at the Mailman Center in our leadership programs. A couple years ago, in our self-advocate leadership training group for adults with disabilities, I met a young woman. She had cerebral palsy, was turning 30, and shared a concern. She had only wanted a boyfriend and was terrified of dating. She also had never been to a GYN. This totally broke my heart. Another story, a woman attorney that I met had spina bifida, used a wheelchair, and shared horrific stories of being in successive domestic violence relationships. If they had received sexual knowledge at a younger age from their teachers and or parents, therapists, and doctors, I'm pretty sure the above mentioned stories could have been averted. Knowledge about sexuality allows youth to make wiser decisions, protect themselves from harm, be more aware of healthy relationships, sexual boundaries, and appropriate behavior. This could not be truer for youth and young adults with disabilities. We're thrilled to have two experts with us today to discuss this important topic. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Lourdes Rios, and I have her bio. So Lourdes is a licensed mental health counselor and board certified sex therapist. She has worked in the medical field for over 25 years. During her time as a counselor, Lourdes has worked in the field of cognitive and emotional wellness with trauma, applied behavior analysis with children on the autism spectrum, ADHD, anxiety, addictions, relationship issues, and many more. Lourdes is currently a doctoral candidate in sexology at IICS. She believes that early intervention is essential to the well-being of families and individuals. Educating parents of individuals on the autism spectrum regarding the family dynamics and sexuality is also important part of early intervention. So we're very excited to have you, Lourdes, and welcome. I'm going to take off my screen. Okay. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, I forgot to say a few housekeeping things. If you have questions, please put them in the chat room. And Lourdes would like questions as she goes. She would like to make this very interactive on her part of the talk. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be working with you guys. You guys can see me okay? Because I can't see the second screen. Got it? I'm Lourdes. I had the introduction from Rochelle. Thank you very much. I'm passionate about working with individuals and families with special needs, and it's an honor to be here with you guys. Thanks for joining us. The overview, we will discuss understanding difficulties with that youth face in the autistic spectrum disorder, as well as intellectual disabilities and developmentally delayed individuals. The difficulties that they have with verbal as well as nonverbal communication. We're also going to address strategies for improving social skills specific to sexuality and developing healthy intimate relationships. We're also going to talk about how to teach attributes of healthy relationships and body autonomy. And we'll share some of the resources. Okay. Individuals in the autistic spectrum disorder, ID or DD, may have difficulty developing language skills and understanding what others say to them. All right, that's me right there. Pleasure to meet you again. Let's start by talking about the difficulties that individuals in the spectrum and individuals with developmental disabilities face, okay? There are some challenges. Let's start there. And I want you guys to ask questions. You can go ahead and write them in as I go through every slide so that we can cover the questions that may come up. Some of the social communication challenges that individuals in the spectrum face are understanding spoken language. About a third of people that have autism, they're in the spectrum, they're nonverbal, okay? And this creates challenges for individuals that work with these populations or for parents as well. They have difficulties understanding gestures. They also have difficulties in making eye contact. Direct eye contact can be very threatening for certain individuals. And that's part of our culture, to address someone and make eye contact. Facial expression sometimes is very difficult for these populations to understand the gestures that are being made. Another difficulty that they face is understanding the display of emotions that someone may have, right? And we can go over examples with this. Someone that will not understand what crying is. And sometimes once you teach that crying, people cry when they're sad, they may not understand when somebody's crying out of happiness. Okay, you won the lotto. Why are you crying? You should be very happy. It's very difficult for them to understand anything that's not very concrete or linear at times, right? Another challenge that they face is understanding tone of voice, the use of tones of voice, right? And understanding and also how to use the tone of voice when they're addressing other people. So these are some of the social communication challenges that we have. I would like to go into like giving tips for parents and providers of care that are working with individuals in these populations, right? It's very important to address the individual as an adult. and take into consideration whatever stage of growth and of development they're in, because sometimes we tend to not talk appropriately, right? And that might affect them because we're trying to teach how to use appropriate language, right? So that's super important. It's very important when we're addressing these individuals, right, in the spectrum, that we don't use like terms of endearment like sweetie or honey, or because in every action that we have, we are teaching something, even if we are not on teach mode, we're just conversing, right? Getting information back and forth with an individual. So it's really important, right? We wouldn't want them to go into a bank and call the bank teller sweetie if we're trying to teach banking skills. And this is very important in social communication. With individuals, specifically with individuals in the spectrum, we have to be very literal, very clear, very concise, so that they can understand. When we are talking, again, they're learning, right? We're talking. I work with ABA therapy as well, and I'm also the parent of a child with autism. So this is really important to be able to say exactly what you mean, because things can be very confusing to them. Example being trying to tell a joke or saying something that's a little bit more abstract or has a second or third meaning, or like in communication, we understand it's extremely important that we communicate things clearly, right, to them when we're talking, because we're modeling as we talk. Every behavior we have, we're teaching and modeling. We need to take the time to listen, okay? If we are working with specific kids, we get to know our children, right? Children or individuals, wherever we're at. And we get to know where they're at cognitively, let's say. And it's very important that we wait for a response. Some of these individuals will have receptive, expressive language disorders, or they may take a little bit longer to process certain kind of information and understand. So we need to just wait and listen, okay? This helps the individual to know that you're attentive to their needs, and this helps too with them being able to develop, okay, in the future. We need to be able to provide meaningful feedback when it comes to language, okay? For example, the use of inappropriate words, and this happens a lot, specifically with ASD, to where they may name something else. So it's very important that when we give that feedback, we are very specific to what is being said and how it's being said. Again, we do a lot of modeling when we're in this process, right? This is not the way this is said, this is the way it's said, or this is the way something's requested, or even just saying excuse me and not interrupting a conversation, which happens a lot, the impulsiveness and so on and so forth. It's important to give them appropriate feedback with examples of what is appropriate, so that they are better able to communicate with other individuals, because we're talking about language in a social context, right? So that's very important. There's another thing that's really important, and many of us have been guilty of this, right, as providers and parents, to where we may have a child or an individual that's probably nonverbal, and people ask you questions, right, in a group of family, because they want to know everything, and they think we know everything, right? So they ask questions, and the individual may be in the room, and that can be very uncomfortable. We have to be very, very aware of this, because this individual may or may not be verbal, may not be able to express, or may feel like there's no inclusion in the conversation. So we need to address this and educate parents, family members, or other healthcare professionals to this. This is extremely important. And this is something that we can very easily fall into in a professional and in a home environment. Do you have any questions regarding this first slide?
There are no questions yet, Lourdes.
Okay, all right. Communication requires the ability to share what you feel or want to say and to understand and respond to what others are feeling or saying. Basically what I just said, we just be very mindful, have to be very mindful. We have to be very, very aware that individuals in the spectrum, and the whole spectrum, ASD, ID, ADD, are very challenged by communicating in social contexts. So these are things, like for example, when we do behavior therapy, we create scenarios of different social contexts. And we do that based on wherever the individual's at. We could be dealing with a smaller child, with youth, right? Teenagers and everything else that are going to be exposed to anything that's social. Going to the mall, going to the movies, going to Burger King, things that are so, people don't really think about this. We have to teach these things, right? Because it can be very scary if they don't have the skills. So we do a lot of practicing, modeling, verbal, nonverbal, and different scenarios, right? And we might not get everything that may happen, but at least we can work with the basics when we're working and communicating in social contexts, okay? And there needs to be exposure with support. Do a lot of coaching. It's very important when you're working with ASD, IDDD to be very patient, to show interest, okay? To teach the individual to be able to express anger or any feelings that are there without the aggression. We like to use a lot of visuals with children to express emotions. That's when we start. We also do it with our youth, teenagers. How can we express our feelings without raising our voices too loud or communicating somehow? I don't speak sign language, but we can work with signs, okay? Wait, go, or anything else that needs to be communicated, okay? We also have to be very persistent and always stay very positive. In terms of communication, and this happens quite often, we might see attention-seeking behavior. And this can happen with younger ones or the teenagers to try to get attention. It's attention-seeking behavior, like going on the ground or screaming loud or running into someone just because they want that attention. We have to work very closely with them to find ways to approach someone appropriately. Okay, distance, arm's length, all these things. Tapping, lifting hand. And these are just the basics that we teach. So when they get into the other stages, they're better able to manage different situations, okay? It's important to show interest, like I told you, and be affectionate, okay? There's a question.
Yeah, there are a couple questions. One is, does modeling include labeling of emotions?
Yes, initially, like when they're smaller and you're trying to teach happy. We can label emotions, let's say by doing visuals, okay? Smiling, happy, tears, sad, faces. We have little faces that we have for anger. And we try to work it that way so they can understand. See, when you're teaching and they're a little bit smaller, you start there, right? And obviously there's gonna be situations like the example I gave you of a person crying out of happiness and them not understanding. And that's when an explanation may come. But we have to have that frame to work with, to start with, in order to start developing these skills and the use of language. So yes, definitely. Did I answer your question?
There's a couple more questions.
Okay.
as well. Can you share examples of an interaction that you may encounter with a person with ASD, ID, or DD?
An example of an interaction, be more specific.
Denise Ortiz, can you specify your question a little bit more? I'm going to read the next question and while we wait for Denise to respond as well. So another person asked, how would you recommend that individuals on the spectrum explain to new friends or coworkers why they responded in an inappropriate way? Such as your example, why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying. If they are not comfortable with acknowledging that they are on the spectrum, i.e. maybe they are high functioning.
Okay, let me see if I understood the question correctly. How do we teach the individual, right, to explain to other friends?
Yeah, how would you support an individual who is on the spectrum and doesn't want to disclose that they are on the spectrum at work or with friends, but maybe their friends or coworkers think that they're crying or emotions are like don't make sense for the situation?
Well, I think it's extremely important to share. For example, people that go work in certain areas, even if it's a high functioning individual, there are certain behaviors that are going to come up. And when people are not aware of these things, they can't understand or empathize, right? And I've seen this at Publix, I've seen this at Trader Joe's, to where people already know. I would encourage the individual to share, because there are things that are going to come up, things that are going to be verbally told and probably not processed correctly. And it's really important, especially with work situations, also so that they can provide whatever the individual may need, right? An extra explanation, another explanation, another way to do things. Because sometimes there's specific ways that we teach, right? You put this box here, but what if something different happens? How can we talk to the individual? So what may end up happening if you don't share is you don't get the maximum benefit out of the job or the situation, the social situation. Am I making sense?
The person said thank you, yes.
Okay. I would highly encourage for them to share, especially in work situations.
That's all the questions for now, and Denise did not expand on the question.
Yes, I had, I just wanted to, yeah, I sent it via the chat. What I was curious about is that like an example of an interaction, like you have someone with special needs, you said be patient, show interest, like how would you actually handle that? Like you know, I was curious about like an actual example of an interaction, or how would you, you know, like what would you say to be patient and show interest, to make sure that, you know, like you're that the person knows that you're being engaged with them.
Are you talking about the care providers, parents, or just people in general?
People in general. Like a person with special needs is approaching you, you're having a discussion with them. Like what are like things that you would say to be patient, to show interest, to, you know, be respectful? Like what kind of things would you say to them? How would you handle that?
Okay, these would be values that human beings should have anyway, to be patient with everybody and pay attention. And being patient in terms of just waiting for the person to ask and cueing them into waiting for a response. Does that make sense? To show interest, to just make eye contact or engage in some type of way that the person can understand. You're talking about a person on the street, right? Just to be patient primarily and be human. I mean, we should be like these with everybody, right? And it doesn't always happen. But just being patient with the individual. If there's a question, let's say, let me give you an example. If I go to Trader Joe's, because I know they have a lot of special needs people working there. I've seen that the last times I've gone there. And I ask a question. I encountered one of the guys and I asked him a question about what was where. And he had a little bit of a difficult time. I'm not sure that I asked the question correctly, but instead of just flying off and saying whatever, just have the patience to wait and understand that the person's taking time to kind of like look around and find that object or whatever it was that you were asking for. Did that answer your question? I guess so. I didn't get an answer. We should be polite, generally speaking.
There is one more question.
Okay.
Can you speak to the coloration between social awareness / perspective taking in regards to language comprehension?
Okay, ask me the question again. I'm having a little bit of issue processing. Ask me again, Christina.
Let's see. It says, can you speak to the coloration between social awareness / perspective taking in regards to language comprehension? I feel if we don't work to improve these skills, in addition to unfamiliar vocabulary, comprehension of abstract language, feelings, understanding facial expressions, and other people's reaction may be difficult.
It is very difficult. It is very difficult. What we do in ABA is we start from number one. I mean, we have to take into consideration the individual's capacity to understand. So these things take time. As providers, these things take time. We explain, we have visuals, we do scenarios, right? And there's always something that may come up that may not be related to what we've taught, right? It's very important that when we do exposure to social situations, that there's a coach or a trained parent to be there to assist, right? Because we can only ask so much. I mean, if your brain just doesn't work in an abstract manner, all we have are concrete examples, right? If anything else does come up outside of that, then that gives us an opportunity to go further. Did that answer your question? In other words, as providers or parents, we have to be aware of the individual's capacity for certain things. So our expectations as providers or parents have to be very realistic to what we're dealing with. And there's always something that's going to come up that needs to be taught. And it requires patience and being extremely consistent and doing a lot of repetition. So awareness on the provider or parents, caregivers. Okay.
Thank you. Those are all the questions for now.
All right, awesome. So in improving social skills related to sexuality. Again, we do a lot of these things by modeling. If we have, let's say, a teenager that wants to go out to anywhere, the movies or a restaurant, we need to play scenarios of how that would be, right? We can do things such as, does the person have appropriate clothing? Are you well groomed? Appropriate clothing, you're going to the beach, you're gonna be wearing shorts, you're gonna, specifically give the information according to that situation that the individual is going to be exposed to, right? We may even have a coach when we take the individuals out or go with the individuals out, right? And there are things that need to be pre-planned. For example, right? If you go to the movie theater, pre-plan, who's paying? Right? Simple things that are gonna make a big difference. Is there a parent going or a chaperone or a coach? When going out to dinner, what restaurant would you like to go to? Where would you like to sit? Can they ask for anything appropriately without shouting? How are we going to get there? These are all things that you have to pre-plan, right? And when you do like examples of what may happen, examples of different scenarios that you play to help the individuals, right? One big thing is tipping. Tipping is a big deal. Why do I have to tip if I already paid $8.99 for the steak? Because this is the way we do things. See, there are things that are maybe written on the menu, when you see the 8, 10, 20, but why? And then you have to explain these people are doing a job and this is how we do things socially, right? Who's paying? Who's paying for what? All right. Also, ask for anything appropriately without shouting. or jumping into people, because we've had this happen too. I've been out with my child as well, my son, as well as children that we've worked with and teenagers, right? Hey, bring me water. Not appropriate, right? And we may run into different situations. That's what we're there for, to teach the appropriate social skills, right? And we're gonna go into sexuality in a minute. Do we have any questions?
There was one more question. What is the best way to respond when someone is constantly asking you something and you're in the middle of another conversation?
Okay, we use interventions for that in behavior, as well as when we didn't have ABA and the programs had to be implemented in the home. What we do in that case is teach space, wait. Sometimes you have to use visuals. Sometimes you have to use a stop sign. That's just as easy as that. Eventually you do away with the stop sign, right? But initially, right? Because that's impulsive behavior. At that moment, sometimes we do plan ignore, which means you ignore the negative behavior. It's a maladaptive behavior. You ignore it unless the child's in danger, of course. But you teach verbally and with modeling as well, right? You have to wait for your time. When the time comes, you may have to give like a nonverbal cue, wait, or now, or open your arms, or anything that indicates, but you have to be very consistent with that. And also, it's very important to reward a behavior. You know, you don't have to give a big gift after the child has learned, or the individual has learned to wait, right? It's very difficult when we're dealing with impulsive behaviors. But just a praise, a verbal praise will be enough. Thank you so much, you did great. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's do it that way, and let's continue that way. Usually a sign will help. Stop. We've drawn signs of stop for different situations. Stop, space. 1 minute, 2 minutes. And make sure that the child is paid attention to afterwards, okay? Did that answer your question? Yes. No more questions?
No more questions, just a comment that says social stories are also great tools.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, if you want to hear anything, any anecdotes, anything that you've gone through that we could all benefit from, I have tons of them. And they do help because you draw from those examples, okay? And we've all been through different situations that could help someone else. So if there's anything else, just type it in and we'll share. So when it comes to social skills related to sexuality, I love that picture. How to appropriately ask for a date. These are things that need to be taught to individuals, right? Is the parent going unchaperoned, or is the dating coach going to be present? Have you ever danced alone or with someone? It's very, very, very important, not only in improving social skills related to sexuality, to make individuals aware of respect and personal space. I like to use the arm's length, okay? Arm's length, space, and ask, okay? In terms of this, there's behaviors too that are non-spoken behaviors. I remember going out to a dinner and it was mixed with people with special needs and regular kids and everything else. And there was a situation where one of the kids just placed his hand on the girl's leg. She came up to me and said, I feel extremely uncomfortable with that because he was special needs. How can I tell him that that's not appropriate? I mean, he's not my brother. He's not someone that I feel that comfortable talking to. So these are really, really important things that we need to address when there are behaviors related to sexuality, right? And sharing with other people. And these are things that are taught throughout the stages of growth and development, again, to whatever is appropriate, right? With children too. Space. I had a child that would come straight to my breast and grab my breast, 8-year-old. Not appropriate. I asked the mom, you know, was he breastfed? He's so comfortable with that part of the body, but we need to let him know that this is just not appropriate. He had been breastfed and he was very comfortable with that, and in their family it was okay. But when you go out in society or with teachers, or in a store, you know, in a Kmart, going to someone and just grabbing their breast is not appropriate. So we have to teach respect for that personal space. That's a biggie. All right. And that starts from the time they're smaller and throughout their stages of growth and development. There's also examples that can be provided. For example, when they're going out to prom, have they danced before? What to expect? The type of music, the type of behavior, opening the door, bringing the flowers, things like that. We have to take it according to whatever their stage of growth and development is. Also, it's really important. I was talking to someone just yesterday about contracts. I didn't know such a thing existed now, but people have like dating contracts that are written and people agree to that. So it's really important to communicate clearly with sexual partners, right? And this gives us an extra option to do it written, very concrete. So how do you communicate clearly with sexual partners? I'll do this, but not that. You can kiss me on the cheek, but not on the lips. Yes to this and no to that. Can I put my arm around you? I have to think about it. Respect space. Learn to listen to what the other person's telling you. It's not, I think she wanted to, but she told me no. Well, this is taught to individuals, period, but specifically with our children and our individuals in the spectrum, right? Maybe later. Can't kiss me now, but maybe later. Or not now. Or I have to talk to my older sister first, or I have to talk to my mom about this. And it's very important to show respect for what is being asked from the other person, right? A no is a no, a yes is a yes. What are we going to work on? And the contract made me think yesterday, I didn't put any of that here because that just happened, about putting things in writing so there's no confusion to what is okay and it's not okay. Any questions?
There is a question. Let me see really quick. Okay. I know a young man who is on the spectrum and he has a reputation of being a ladies' man, quote. However, what is the appropriate way to help him discern when a young lady is being nice to him? It doesn't necessarily mean she has a special interest in him and she just did it to be polite or be professional because it's part of her job.
Yes, this happens a lot. Well, he looked at me, he smiled at me. It happens with our populations, right? But it happens with regular people too. The main thing is communication, right? A ladies' man, I like that. Ask in a very respectful manner. It's really hard to create that space in assuming, but it's really the only way that we could get a specific answer, right? How do we explain this? We might give examples, we might do role playing, and ask the individuals to just ask the person, I would like to take you to the movies, is that okay? Right? Respect of personal space, same things we've been talking about. Not just jump into someone impulsively because they smiled at you and you think they like you, right? Have a person, a coach, a teacher, whoever your person, the person that you trust the most is. It could be a sister, it could be a brother, it could be an aunt and a grandmother, okay? There's always someone that you trust to talk about anything, any of these things with. So we should use that person as a resource too. The teaching has to be extremely concrete, and certain cue words could be used if they don't have a repertoire of words, right? Can I call you? Just be mindful and respectful and show boundaries, right? When we talk about boundaries too, I want you guys to share a little bit with me. It's kind of hard not to have you guys in the audience and not seeing all of you. Give me some physical examples of what a boundary would be for you, right? And we can discuss about them, because when we talk about boundaries, boundaries is something that's so abstract, right? I tell someone, respect my boundaries. What is a boundary? What do you mean? And again, we need to go back to those physical examples, right? What is a boundary? Is a boundary a big wall? Which means stop. Is a boundary, I don't know, a fence? Stop. That's a boundary. And we need to respect those boundaries, right? Just give the individual a visual to what that line is that we don't cross. And learn to ask, can I invite you? Did anybody write any examples or what a physical boundary may be? We may be able to show a picture to the individual to make it more concrete. No crossing, no going over. Did that answer your question?
There was one example from someone who said, when I work with kids as a therapist and school social worker, my professional boundaries are that I will high five or shake hands, but not hug.
That's good. That's very good. See a person, high five. Is high five okay? It's really hard to get the individual to learn that nonverbal cue of no hugs. So what I've done personally with my son, for example, is ask. When he doesn't know to ask, and we've been in this situation a lot because he's a hugger. He's like a teddy bear, right? He's huge, but he's like a teddy bear. The person will come, there's a distance, and he'll look at me. I said, ask, shake hands. Can I give you a hug? If it's someone that he feels is a new friend that I have that has come over to the house or wherever we're at, right? Or shake hands. Now with the coronavirus, now we may have to teach, you know, mask, distance, and maybe the elbow if we're in a good environment. So that's good. That was good. Thank you. Anything else in terms of boundaries or any questions? Oops.
I would say some people are saying, my son is also a ladies' man. When I try to set boundaries because he likes to compliment everyone and then ask him to be his girlfriend, he gets very angry with me.
Practice, practice, practice. Another way.
Yeah.
Practice, practice, practice. Arm's length. These things need to be repeated over and over again and be very concrete. Boundaries, pictures of boundaries. What is a boundary? You go until here. You can't do that, right? And ask. When it comes to the anger, we face that a lot too. I want to hug that person. Teach them to breathe or hold an object, right? Maybe I carry those squeeze balls and breathe through it. And eventually, it's very funny, especially with the little ones, they go, and they learn to breathe on their own. And this is a skill for any adult, actually, in a difficult situation. Did that answer your question? For the mom, right? Mom with the ladies' man. Anything else?
Yes, that answered her question. Another comment, when I worked with boys at yeshiva, they didn't know personal boundaries. They would literally touch my purse, sit on my desk, put their feet on my desk, and that had to be taught even to 10 to 13-year-olds.
Yes, absolutely. I've worked with kids at different stages of growth and development. Parent teaching, if you're a provider, I didn't get your name, if you're a provider, it's to train the parents and talk about, you know, the appropriate behavior and its consequences, right? Because what I have found is that sometimes people do not think about potential consequences, right? It may make other people feel uncomfortable. Not everybody understands. I find myself still explaining on the street anywhere, right? So we have to teach our children and train the parents on what appropriate behavior is, teach them the intervention, teach them how we're going to replace that behavior. And above all things, always just do the clap and just do that positive reinforcement so that that behavior can continue, okay? That's really important, teaching the parents. Anything else? We're running right into the questions and answers, so we're good.
Another question is, I work with a cognitively delayed individual who has cerebral palsy, age 26, cognitively 14. How do we help an individual who thinks any bit of being nice from the opposite sex means they want sex? How do we get them to recognize that this isn't what that means?
And he's already a little bit older, so that's more of a challenge, right? Just the same way teaching boundaries. This person has a cognitive age of 14, right? So teach them at that level of understanding, appropriate, not appropriate. You might have to use physical cues as well, right? Not only verbal, modeling, but physical. Appropriate, not appropriate, appropriate, not appropriate. People are nice. Mom is nice. It doesn't mean she wants to have sex, right? Your neighbor's nice. It doesn't mean they want to have sex, right? Just teach physical boundaries. No touching. It's a little bit more difficult when the individual's older and has not had the education. Early education is so important. And,
Lourdes, hi, this is Shelley. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I had like a comment about that last comment, because doesn't it somewhat have to do with feeling rejected? That's for all of us. It's really hard to feel rejected, and having somehow explaining in a more of a concrete manner that they might not be into you romantically, but they could be a friend, you know, like, so having those distinctions more clear, because like you were saying, it does have to be more in a concrete way that we explain these things. But I think it's possible to help them kind of understand it, that it doesn't mean they can't be in each other's lives. They just don't want to have sex. I don't know if that helps, but
very good point, Shelley.
That's a thought.
Yes, no, absolutely. Absolutely. To teach the differences between friendships. We are friends, and not necessarily you want to have sex with me because you're friendly. Absolutely. And that's why I was saying it's a lot more challenging for providers when they're older, because these things have not been taught. When you start, when they're very small, teaching them sexual behaviors, private, public, we've talked about this before, parts, sharing, not sharing, it's a little bit easier. It becomes a challenge anyway when they become teenagers, but it's a lot harder when they're at that stage. And yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you, Shelley. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
Or comments? Okay, so we've talked about boundaries. Boundaries to what that physical boundary is that we're not supposed to cross, right? So looking at the other person, this is me, respect my boundaries. This is something that also has to be taught. And again, modeling with different scenarios. And listen to the person, I am. And this is kind of like a little bit into the previous slide. I like to do this. I'm comfortable trying this, but I don't like to do that. I wish I could, whatever that may be. Or I would like to experiment what it's like to hold hands while we walk, for example. Or I'm learning about my body and how these things work.
Okay, there are a couple questions.
Okay.
My son requests a hug when he sees I'm upset at him or reprimand a behavior. When I respond with, I don't want a hug, his anxiety or aggression tends to escalate. Any suggestions?
Yes, I've been through this situation. How old is the son? For
16.
16. Okay. I don't know the rest of the things where he's at. But in terms of that, you can also use the visuals. Upset, space. Give me some time, please. Give me some time. I love you, but I'm upset right now. That's something that I learned with my son. And he taught me this. One time he was upset at me. I went to hug him. He says, that's when he was able to talk more. He was a lot older. I love you, but I'm mad at you. And I needed to understand that. So it's a matter of reassuring them of that love that you have for them. Unconditional love, right? As parents and care providers too. We love our children. But knowing that you need that space. And that would help if he understands verbal behavior. I love you, but right now I need space. Anything where he understands that you need that space. It doesn't have to be arm's length. It could just be, I don't know if you can see me, this big, space. And eventually they understand. Nobody likes to be rejected, of course, but there is that space, respect my boundary. Not now. Did that help in any way?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Another question, how to teach to manage sexual arousal? Is this even possible?
How to manage sexual arousal in a teenager.
How to teach a person to manage sexual arousal?
Again, this has to be taught. If we're talking, well, the education should start earlier than the preteen years, right? But we need to teach what's appropriate. If you're talking about arousal and masturbation, is this what you're talking about? Or arousal with other people where they have erections, or females? I'll go in reference to that, so we can wait for the
arousal and interactions.
Arousal and interaction. That's very challenging too. We can start talking and educating our kids on sexual behavior right before the preteens, right? Explaining the erection and explaining space. I was talking about a situation when the teenager went to the pool, he would get erections, right? And the suggestion was take a towel. Can't help the erection, right? If you're, there's girls with bikinis or whatever, they get visually stimulated and there comes the reaction. Something like taking a towel to the pool. Something like creating distance when this happens and teaching them what's appropriate or not. When it comes to privacy, masturbation and privacy, I've had that happen too, to where you have to teach what's appropriate and where it's appropriate. In your room, with a towel, in your bathroom, when you shower, and just teach what would be the appropriate behavior to that. It's difficult because especially when they're boys, it shows. With girls, it's other behaviors. Like, oh, I want to touch you, and so we have to teach that boundary. Did that help, or?
Another question related to that was related to masturbation.
Okay. Just related to masturbation, we have to take in consideration the people's values, right? But in terms of masturbation, the same thing, girls as well as boys. What is done in public and what is done in private, right? I had a kid that would just pop out his penis and urinate or get naked. We were just taking a break from the therapy, get naked and start masturbating, not appropriate. It took some time to teach that. Private, and he could hardly speak. So it was very difficult to teach him, but we were able to do that. Private, go in your room, close the door. And we provided breaks specifically for that because we did therapy, like I think it was a 4-hour block, right? So we would provide breaks for that. And let him know, private, take your time. And that would be okay and appropriate in this specific setting, your room, with a towel. in the bathroom, whatever the parent agrees to it. Outside of that, and this happens with many behaviors, even the behaviors that we see making dolphin sounds or, you know, the flapping and everything. Some people's goals is to completely stop the behavior, and if they're sensory motivated and they need to, you can do that in this space. This is appropriate, this is not appropriate. So it's just a matter of repeating the behavior, giving the examples, walk into the room, appropriate here. And you can use just a word if they're not very verbal, right? Or not verbal, or a sign. Private, private.
Lourdes, we have time for one more question
Okay.
or comment.
Another question was related to, as a person with ASD, high functioning ASD, how can they express to someone they're spending time with or dating, you know, their boundaries without the other person feeling like they're rejected?
Again, communication and even a contract. This is, people have their space. You have your space. Give different examples of what your space is. Some people don't like to be bothered when they're eating. That's a good example. That's your space. Some people don't like to be bothered when they're in the bathroom, having a bowel movement. The door's closed. Explain it with very concrete examples. This is how you feel, right? This is how they feel. It's very difficult though, because we're human. We're human, and dealing with rejection is very hard. But that's a good way, that's a good start, to try to put it into specific examples. And coming back to the individual and saying, this is what you like, this is what you don't like. Right? Well, this person may not like this or this. They may require, if it's a couple just starting, to have coaches. That's the best thing. Or parents that will help, that are open-minded, or a sister that they feel really comfortable in talking to. These are things that help, that I have found that have helped.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lourdes. This is very, very illuminating. We could go on and on and on about this topic. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Okay, so
all right.
Yeah, can you stop sharing so then we can get the next speaker up?
And there are the
Resources.
Okay.
There were some questions asking about books or resources that would be useful on the topic of teaching behaviors or using visuals, things like that. Maybe Lourdes, if you could maybe type some suggestions in the chat box for that question. And also maybe you could type in the resources or something, or are we sending out the slides? Some people are asking about resources.
Yes, we'll be sending out these slides from both speakers.
Have people, for the sake of time, my email is there. They can email me, or they can even text me. That's the best way to answer, if you would, so that I could look even more resources and books, specific books, to what their need may be. Will that work?
Yeah, your information is in your PowerPoint,
Yes.
the first slide. Yes.
Yes.
So we'll get that to everybody.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to switch gears, and I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Marilyn Booker, my dear friend. Her bio is way too long to read, but I'm just going to say she's a sexuality educator for the past 45 years. She's a diplomat of the American Board of Sexology and an associate fellow of the American Academy of Clinical Sexologists, and certified by the International Transgender Certification Association, ITCA. She is adjunct faculty of 3 South Florida universities, UM being one of them, FIU, and Lynn and St. Thomas. And I'm just gonna stop there because I could read for a long time about the amazing local leader in sexology, Dr. Marilyn Voker. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, Marilyn, you're muted and we can't see your face. Your video's not on.
All right. Let's see what, okay, let's see. It says the host has stopped it. It says the host.
We can hear you now, Marilyn.
Oh, this is.
Oh, now we can see you. Yes.
There we are. And oh my gosh, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for all of you who are there. This is like old home week. Lourdes and Shelley and Christine and a lot of parents that have taught me as well. We've walked together on this journey. And I do want to say thank you to the people at the Mailman Center when I was doing my master's degree in deaf education. So if you see me sign, okay, that's because I dream in signs. And there are some students, many that I've worked with, who needed visuals either in signs or communication boards. And I'll show you some resources as well. And thank you to Shelley and company for putting up the all of these resources as well. I just want to say this is sign for grow and this is sign for ejaculate. And when you really are talking about sexuality, oh, okay, I'm a minister's kid and a former minister's wife, and I grew up with my parents saying there was nothing nasty on our body, although we never talked about it, and that we were to value. The word was value all. When they said value, not just tolerate, accept, value. That for me was really amazing. So when I was 13 years old, just to give you the background, I wanted to teach deaf kids. I was an arrow. That's what I wanted to do. And you'll see some of your students, people that, and you yourself. But sometimes when you're on your arrow, a person comes in and changes your entire course. And that was a little boy named Brian. He happened to have the beautiful brown skin and he had the B sign, Brian. I told the students, and this was way before Google, way before, and bring me words because all words mean something. And so when I was teaching my first year, oh, so many years ago, about 9 deaf children. And so what happened was he brought me words, 3 words from bathroom walls. I had never, 0, had a sexuality class, zip, 0, not these kinds of conversations, nothing. In high school, undergraduate, master's, nothing. And well, I couldn't even sign them. Well, half of one, mother, I can now, I can sign them all. So the interesting thing was, I was challenged and I told him the words were nothing. And it was happening. I love you too, Denise. Okay, so the interesting part is that when he brought me these words and I said the words were nothing, he signed liar you. And I had lied. I had avoided, which a teacher avoided. And so I went and thought, you have to learn. And that's why my doctorate is in sexuality. And I'm grateful to the Mailman Center because for my master's project, I started a deaf baby program with many people. I call it the Dream Team, with many people. And there were parents involved and siblings involved. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot. And we learned about language because as we're seeing with many, many issues, language is a big thing. But the most important part that I always wanted to say is that your children, whatever the level is, or the students you work with, they're going to feel sexual in some way. They may have trouble. They may have trouble with reading, math, or they may be really bright in all those areas. But there may be nothing wrong with the hypothalamus who tells the pituitary gland, go send hormones. Blood rushes down to the body, heart rate, blood pressure, eyes dilate. They're feeling aroused, which is why I'm so glad that I was taught by so many, many students with varying abilities and parents. And thank you, Lourdes, because our daughter, one of our 4, you see these pictures behind me, we got a mob, 4 kids, 12 grandkids, 1 great grand. Okay, the interesting part is that our daughter worked in the area of developmental disabilities, DD, and one of her daughters is a coach along with her daughter's wife. So the interesting part of it is we've always had individuals with all kinds of abilities in our household. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that I learned that can help as well. So I'm going to talk about celebrating sexuality. And I want to look at words because people are bringing up words they don't like. Some people don't like the word special needs. Some people don't like, I mean, I grew up in an area of time where we had the A, remember ARC? And I would never, would ever say the R word. And yet it was okay in those days. So we also have to move and shift and see how would you like me to say? I have a lot of blind friends who say, I'm fine to say blind. I'm fine. Nope, I want you to say visually impaired. So I think it's very important what Lourdes was asking about, what the comfort level was and asking. That's very important. So, okay, let's see. Next slide, please. I'm a techno-dino, so that for sure. All right, so there's a lot of things that have been censored. I'm going to go quickly through it because you'll have these. You can have these. These are put together by a lot of our master's level people as well. Next slide, please. And these are the reason I'm wanting to put these in is so that you can see some of these resources. And a lot of times, it's important to have them out in your house and in your offices where it says sexuality. And thank you to all the parents, yay, Lourdes and company, because I've seen a number of parents online that are so willing to speak up and out and value the sexuality. Next slide, please. This is me. Yep. There's a lot of things that here, more important, right here is Dr. Paul put a number of resources on YouTube's and things online. So I want you to take a look. And by the way, the first person on there, David Hinchberger, he was like way in the 70s, from Canada. And he has a lot of information as well. Next slide, please. I like to always say, I want to see the person's heart. And this is a hard thing sometimes because what I find is a lot of students want to know about their bodies, even if they have a problem communicating. A lot of students, when they grab, and thank you, Lourdes, for saying, grabbing breast or grabbing, it's saying, I'm interested. I need to know. And so therefore we have to have ways, whether it's going to be visual, and I'll show you some of I brought my anatomical dolls just to show you some of them that I work with the little kids and sometimes older with developmental delays in their thinking process. So, okay, next slide, please. Just say no. And I'm glad that our students want to know. And sometimes by their behaviors, they're telling us they want to know. I'm going to give you an example. One of our daughters, the one who has worked with students with varying abilities, would take in students into their houses. And so Michael was one. I would say he would be described as lower functioning, nonverbal, but you just wait, because we wanted to teach him about public and private, as Lourdes was saying. And so when we gave him a bath, we would say, this is your face, this is your neck, this is your chest. When we got to the private parts, his penis, we would put the washcloth in his hand, and then we would do the guiding on his penis. And a lot of people said to us, he's not going to learn. He's not going to learn. And I said, we want to find how he learns the best. How? And so it took about 2-3 years before, when we got to his stomach, he would put out his hand. He was waiting for the washcloth to go in his hand. And that says you want to find the best way for students to learn. By the way, he was also into, who's that purple guy? Come on, Barney. Well, Barney didn't have a penis. And so we had to sew a purple penis on Barney. We made one. And thank God for my daughter, who's like really great to do that. And that's why when Lourdes was talking about masturbation, because we'll get to some of the resources too, I hope there's a male somewhere in your group that is willing to talk, because a role model, unless the child with a penis is transgender, which I've also worked with gender variant students, that you want to have also a team on your dream team, a male that says, oh yeah, well, sometimes I get erections. Yep, and here's what I do. And the towel is a great one if you're at the beach, or a hat if you're at the movies with somebody, or a restaurant, you put that hat. Okay, so just say no. Next slide, please. And here's this is another one, making sense of sex. This depends on your age of your child and the students that you're working with, but it's really, really important to take a look at some of these wonderful resources and visuals. And sometimes I've had to cut up the pages and show them one at a time, over and over, because sometimes it was too much all at once. And next slide, please. We teach the sign for safety, always safe. You see that in some rappers' songs, because I had some wonderful experiences to go down and ask the rappers, would you put this in? This is a different sign. This is safe, like the umpire would go with the finger spelling safe. And there's 3 ways to be safe. One is physical. You want your child or the students you're working with to have safety of their body. That means we have to talk about all the body, public and private parts. We want them to be emotionally safe, and it's very hard. It's very hard. One of our 12 grandkids is on that spectrum, and I'm really glad our son is a counselor and his wife a teacher, and he's now 13, and it's been about the last 3 years where he's been able to really say, because they've worked very hard all these 13 years and had to have patience. Thank you, Lourdes. Had to have the patience to go over and over, to be able for him to express his emotions or to point. Michael used a communication board, pointed to a picture that was closest to what he was feeling, but that took time and patience. And of course, we want them to be safe sexually. And that means we have to talk about sex. Absolutely. By the way, Michael, he's in his 30s now, back with his mama after our daughter fostered him. And he still loves Barney. Barney kisses us. Barney kisses him. We taught him how to masturbate by Barney, as well as some books. But when Barney in the bedroom got to touch his own penis, Michael finally, after the years, it's interesting to see what works best with everybody. Okay, next slide, please. And these are also, there's some for children and adolescents, and here's a Davida book. And so therefore, I want you to see what's going to be the best and take a look. That's why I wanted to show these resources. Next slide, please. I'm glad these are all here, because when I started, there was very, very few. Next slide, please. Okay, so that means if there's, okay, there we are. Here is our role as parents and thank you, and medical thank you, and mental health professionals. We want to create that milieu that's safe. So where is it that this particular child or teenager or adult feels the safest? It could be in their bedroom talking, it could be in the living room, it could be in an office, and sometimes some of us have gone to homes, others of you have your own office. Where could there be safety? I remember I have a dog that's so sweet. And a lot of the students like to pet this sweetie dog or hold on to something that they felt safe with. It could have been their hoodie, it could have been a blanket, or those balls, those squeeze balls that Lourdes was talking about. We do want to include questions and permission if they are thinking about relationships and dating and sexuality and about their bodies. We do want to assess the individual's capacity, remembering the hypothalamus could be right on track at 13, 14, or wherever, but the processing could be really challenging, all right? We want to educate cognitive. What's the best way? I want to hear about their attitudes. And yes, sometimes they get upset and angry. And I liked it. That question was also so good. What would you say to somebody when, I mean, if somebody's signing, they can see it. If somebody's in a wheelchair, they can see it. If somebody happens to have a guide dog or a cane, they can see it. This is a hard one. I've asked different adults or students in our university settings, how would you want to express how you process? And some people said, I just tell them my brain works differently. That's all they say. So can you say it again, slower? Some people say, I got a bot brain. This was one of them, a robot brain. I got a bot brain, they called it in there. And okay, all right, well, tell me about your bot brain. And some go speedy fast. They said, I'm like the gamers. I'm like the gamers who just go fast. And okay, all right. And so it's interesting to see how each person would want to explain to somebody. And many times they don't. Because who of us just wants to always be saying what may be different about us? So a lot of times they like to say, this is what how we're the same. So when I've gone to different groups, it's been that question is right on target. And there are different answers to that. Communication, verbal and nonverbal. And here's where I want to show the dolls that I brought. These are my anatomical dolls. And for those of you, especially if you are physicians and you're going to be examining students, these dolls come with all their parts. My kids call them the dolls with all their parts. And this particular doll, they do come in different ethnicities: hair, eyes, ears, mouth, nose, chest, breast. Oh, well, this guy had breast hair, but I guess he's been washed a lot. Now, this guy has pubic hair. There's his penis and there's his scrotum. And they do also, I'll show you some of the dolls, they do also have dolls before puberty as well. This particular doll helped us to show, and thank you, Lourdes, what was not appropriate of somebody coming to you and touching you. And so we used a doll that I'll show you the younger person and the doll that was an adult and what was not appropriate. Could they I'll shake hands, or I'll give you an elbow bump. That's one I learned, the elbow bump. And also, you also can teach about private parts. Oh, and everybody has an anus. As one of the jokesters said, we'd be in big doo-doo, huh? And I went, yep. So, and senses of humor are amazing to come out with that as well. I know in your family as well, Lourdes, and so many families. Okay, and we want to be able, as counselors, thank you. Yes, the anatomical dolls are from, now there's several ones. This is from Teach a Body. And here's a female. She comes with her bra, all right, if you're teaching as well. And a lot of them, these are the Teach a Bodies. Please do not put in, unless you want a slew of all kinds of interesting dolls with all their parts. I would put educational anatomical dolls, because you're going to get all kinds of interesting dolls for you as well, because they think you want to have Oh boy, yeah, I know. Oh, there's been all kinds of things. Well, this doll she is in puberty. She has pubic hair and she has a vagina inside. This is actually called the vulva. It's Latin. It means covering. And there's different dolls. This one with different cultures. And these are from Teacher Bodies. And they come with all different clothing if you're going to be teaching as your body changes. And especially for you who are going to be examining, I like to, especially if somebody's really reluctant to go to a doctor, would you take one of the dolls that you relate to and the doctor examines the doll? Absolutely. Teach a body. Right. Thank you. And the doctor would check the ears of the doll and then check the ears of the student. Yes, yes, these are amazing for doctors and nurses and counselors to have if you're talking about appropriate behaviors or if anything happened to you. And then especially if they're going to do a vaginal exam or if they're going to check a penis or scrotum, it's really helpful to do that on the doll. And sometimes then the student would hold the doll, okay. And I like the counting that Lourdes had talked about, the counting, because sometimes people would say, I'm going to count, you count to 10 and I'll be done, and I'll be done, whatever the number was. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the student felt in control in some ways as well when they needed to go to the doctor. And some people provide intense therapy when there has been trauma or when they've really needed, like all of us might have needed intense therapy, all right? And we refer to other professionals. I call this the dream team. I could have never done any of my blessed career without all of you, all of you. Next slide, please. Here are understanding experiences from actually to old age. And this is a very interesting one that Sarah put out. And that part included some things also about relationships and attractions. The reason we're attracted, we have a brain. We have a brain that says, oh, I really think you're cute, you're hot. I was at a conference recently and the students, I asked, who do you think is cute? Oh, well, they told me a lot of people that I didn't even know on TV or the YouTubes. Oh, okay, and why do you think they're cute? And who do you think is hot? Oh, well, they told me that too. They told me that as well. So to validate this is going to be important for our dream team. Next slide, please. There are barriers, and if this hadn't been Brian, if Brian wasn't the boy that opened the door, I call it the marker event or marker person, I probably would have been very nervous. By the way, other signs. This is sign for nervous. Okay, I have to stand for this one. And this is sign, because I'm now at my private parts, for orgasm. Private parts. Orgasm. To have our students learn, well, that's coughing. That's sneezing. You put your hand up. Okay, because that's about safety, okay, especially now, all right? And the interesting part is if they experience an orgasm, it's actually by the same neurologic system. It's called your autonomic nervous system. That's why we sneeze, why we cough, and why we have an orgasm, which is a muscle contraction in our private parts. A lot of students thought they were sick or they were going to die or something was going to happen because no one had explained that. And I know it can be very embarrassing or uncomfortable, which is why we have trained people to do that. I'm so, so grateful. And if there's any challenges by students, of course, I find the students are actually, once we find a way that we can teach, it's usually the parent or the adult who's fearful. And I understand that. If I start to talk about this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? That means they're going to want to have sex all the time. I found, like Lourdes was talking about, not only the boundaries, but where and who are people you can talk to about this. And we listed them. Where and who are people you can talk to. Remembering, there's some students are very smart. They find all kinds of things on the computer. Not me so much, techno dino, but all kinds of things. So we have to have a dream team of what are you looking at? And, well, wait a minute. Is that accurate? Really? Really? But if we teach them about everything else, I'm going to give you an example because I like what Lourdes was talking about, examples. So one of the parents brought in their son, and they were very embarrassed, just really embarrassed, because the son had been masturbating with feces, poop, caca, doo-doo, number 2, whatever you call it, the S word, okay, is that they were very embarrassed and they were upset and they were punishing him. And of course, Mama was cleaning this up in the shower. And I had to validate them as parents. They weren't taught. My parents weren't taught. So I had to validate, but I asked them, did you, because their son had some cognitive challenges. And I said, did you teach your son exactly what to brush the teeth with? Yes. Toothbrush, toothpaste? Yes. Did you teach your son what to wash your hair and body with? Exactly. Yes. Shampoo, soap, yes. Now we come to something that it can be really challenges is he's trying to use some lubricant. And that part, it's not, what he chose was not so great because feces has bacteria, but no one taught him about water-based lube. And so I asked the parents if I could show him the water-based lube. Like, I wasn't going to do anything inappropriate on his penis, but I wanted to show him. And then I'll show you some resources for it. Oh, and then I said, and who should be cleaning up? Because this young person was about 14. Who should be cleaning up? The shower. Not Mama. This young guy, of course, we had to teach him also. Lourdes, when you were talking, I was just like, he would go into the Walgreens or CVS and go, water-based lube in a loud voice. And so we had to teach him. Now, you find the number, all right? And you don't have to announce it to everybody. If you're kind of confused, okay, you pick one person and in your quiet voice, you ask. But once he found what it was on, and once he found the consequence, all right, of using feces, he had to wash it up in the shower. Oh man, he was on water-based lube. And he learned not to shout and not to, I always say to people, do you announce to the world that you had a bowel movement? Do you announce to the world that you peed? All right. So if your child or the student you work with can get those boundaries, they can learn similar boundaries. They can't stop getting an erection or getting aroused. That's what they can do. Is what do I do when I get aroused, when I have an erection? That they can learn over time, absolutely. Next slide, please. This is the Ask for Kids book of social rules. And I love it, Jennifer, and she has a lot of illustrations in that book as well. So I like that of tweens and teens, and I like that it's especially focused on that. Next slide, please. And here's the handbook for parents. Okay, all right, here's the issues for dating and relating. And thank you, Lourdes, for, absolutely talking about, first of all, I have to have an awareness. And some people are not interested in dating at all. Some people want to be around. Some people, we have to look at their developmental markers, both in how they are thinking, their developmental process, and what they want to dress. I mean, look back, please. Look back on when you were a teenager. Were there things I came out of that era of mini skirts and go-go boots, which I couldn't wear as the minister's kid, but I could wear at college, I could try them out. Would I wear them now? Not so much. So the interesting part is that these developmental markers of where you can try these on and where would not, I call them school clothes when we were all in school, and club clothes. Oh, those are school clothes. Oh, that's clothes you wear to CVS. Oh, that's what you wear to Trader Joe's. Oh, that's what you wear on the job. Oh, if you went to a club. And so we had sometimes to put pictures or labels. And so in those social books, that's where I usually put them. So it was unique to each person. Social conversations. And again, I have to look. This is really hard because I have to look at what students are calling. Now for me, I grew up in that feminist period of time. Guess what? My grandkids who are in college, those are the ones in college, are calling each other bro. I don't care if it was a female, a male, and I'm like, bro, you're calling a female bro? And yeah, get over it. Get over it. I know who I am. And so it's so interesting to see where we also have to look at the microcosm of what they're growing, where they're growing in. And okay, so I have to ask a lot of questions as well. And their emotional identifications, and they may not want to go to and here I'm going to ask here, because some people don't like the word special needs group. And so I'm going to ask, you can jump in anytime. Some people do not like this word. They want to go to just a group. And so a lot of students that I don't want to be identified in that way. And others are like, I'm cool. This is my peeps. They said, fun, flirt, and touch. This is a very interesting, okay, I was just using it. I don't know if you'd have to read it backwards, I guess, on this. It's called body language, flirting cards, okay? And it's listed in the resources, okay, at the end of this. And what they have is a number of pictures. And it's pretty heterosexual, but I like when there's also just one person. What is her body saying? What is her face saying? Take a look at the eyes, okay? Take a look at body. And when they do have, okay, here's a couple. And okay, what do you see? Now, sometimes it takes a lot. Sometimes I had to make these pictures bigger so that they could see it even more, because then they would have to get really close to the person, which, as Lourdes already pointed out, may not be so appropriate to kind of see what's on the eyes and face. So I would have to make the picture bigger, but also bring it out farther. First closer, and then bring it out a little farther, appropriate to what you might be seeing at a party or restaurant, etc. So fun, flirt, and touch, that's one of the great resources. I'm always looking for them. They have wonderful pictures. They just have wonderful pictures, and I like it. I really like it. The affection, how do you show affection? And who do you show affection to? Who's in that circle that you can go up and just hug? My family were huggers. I like to hug, but I have to ask, would you like to shake hands? Would you like to do elbow bump? I give them options. I would not want them to say, if I go, hey, I'm gonna give you a hug. And how many people, let me just say, I'm sure you parents have, how many people want to hug our kids because they feel pity or see them as babies or see them as holy innocents? Now, none of those relate to sexuality because the hugging part is, okay, who is comfortable with a hug? And asking, absolutely. Yes, no, maybe later. I'll think about it. I'll talk to. I loved all those options that Lourdes gave. Empathy is very hard to teach. Others get it. But empathy is really hard. And that rejection, thank you, Shelley, for bringing this up. Part of dating and issues is that we all have been rejected. And we need to help to prepare our students. I was talking to a group of FIU students, and there was also the U of M student group. And I was asking about, nobody likes rejection, but when you're rejected, what are things you can think about to help you? Most of them said, well, some of them said, and they put in different words, let me just say, as teenagers, and yeah, well, they're an a-hole, or, oh, what a F-up. Oh, they're just an ass. Oh, and they would say these things, and okay, but what happens when you get rejected? And some people cried, and some people said, I want people to be my friend. Okay, yes, that would be so normal to want friends. So let's see people in your life who are your friends, and what do friends do? And they can still say, I don't like this. A friend can say, I don't want that. I'd like this. We can share this, but I'm not ready for that. And so those are important. Empathy and tact, very, very difficult for a lot of teenagers, period, and young people. So I work with some older people who have no empathy and tact. And let me just say, they're not on any spectrum that I know of. Okay, all right, so they need to see role models. And that's why it's so wonderful that all of you are there, and the guys need to see male role models. I'm gonna show you 8 types of intimacy, only one is sex, and identifying what are qualities you're attracted to. I like gamers. Okay, that's my son still like gamers, and he's married and he has 2 kids and works for Microsoft. So, okay, there's some things that are going to last forever. Identifying, and thank you for saying coaches, Lourdes, because one of our granddaughters has gone as the coach on a date, and noticing things like who opens the door, who pays that tipping one. That's interesting. And also when you're dancing. Okay, and where do you hold somebody when you're dancing? It's so interesting to see. And here we had somebody saying about a concern. That's coaching. Who's on the dream team that can help you? Dating etiquette and dating strategies. Somebody put something in. I'm concerned and I want to be sure and address these. And Lourdes, you can jump in, and Shelley, this is an important part, or anybody in the team. I think there was a question that came in about concerned about a son. If not, let's go to the next. And this is lifelong.
Yeah, there is a question.
Yes.
The question is, let me open it. I'm often concerned that my son will repeat certain language related to our conversation at home about sexual topics. For example, at school, he may say, don't play with penis at school, do that at home. This may come up randomly and out of context. What do you say?
Yes, I interrupted. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the last, out of context.
Yeah, the last part was just, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. First of all, they're learning. Okay? And they're getting it. That's the first part. They got the information. Now they need to get, where is the appropriate place to say it? And so sometimes we say, okay, and we have to list them. Sometimes I put in their social books, who, sometimes we write it on the door. You know, we talk about these things at home, outside this door. No, it depends on how the student learns. One person had it in very high function, had it on their watch, and they put the topics. And I am techno-dino, I already told you, but went on their watch, the computer, to see, wait, if it's, I talk about ejaculations. No, I do that at home or with certain, and they would list the people. And so they had it on the watch. I was like, whoa, great, good. But finding the best way. But the good news is that your child is getting it. Okay, now we shape those boundaries. Thank you, Lourdes, and exactly for bringing that. Next slide, please. I like all your questions. I think we all do. And here's Help for Parents by Mark. Next slide, please. And these are all the feelings, and I have to validate. Some people are shocked when they see their child like looking at adult films. Well, yes, they're savvy, they go online, and it is a way that you want to see, which is age old, by the way, age old, of people looking at visuals, okay? So the interesting part is it means they need information. They need information. They're looking, they're seeing, so maybe you can provide them, and this is going to be difficult for some people, but it's a clue. I've got arousal going on. I've got a visual attraction going on. Okay, let's also see if we could put some boundaries on some of them as well, because I wouldn't want also our students to be in any way targeted or used in any way. Some people are fine. They don't care. They're even, I'm not interested. Some people are like, bleh, sucky, sign language for sucky. I don't like this. Some people are mad. Why do we have to talk about this? Well, because I want you to know information. I don't want to do sex. You don't have to. Nope, you don't have to. I just wouldn't want you to be tricked. I'd want you to know about it. But there's a lot of things. Do I have to eat broccoli? This was the next thing. you would have to ask your parent the rules of the house about broccoli. So I wasn't going to get into that one. All right. So, and some people laugh because either they're embarrassed or they think it's funny. And I have to just say here, you want to know that some people have been inappropriately touched and they get scared. That's why we teach about this too, but not just for that reason. It's because they're also, all of us are sexual beings in some way, but I would also want to protect as well. One of the schools that I taught in really briefly is that I was showing some of the books early on, and using the dolls, and one student, they said, you don't need this student because this student can't understand. And I went, I want all the students there. So the 7 or 8 students were there. And when we got to the inappropriate touching, student began to, okay. It took us 3 months, which still is on my heart, where I went to the parents who were upset that I was saying, but I'm saying, look, you're a student. I went to the school principal. I went to the people and the different people in the school. And then we finally got to the bus driver. And this child was the last student off, and was being inappropriately touched. So I never say students can't learn. I never say there has to be a way. That for me, they will show us. And so I was very proud. Whew, but I'm sorry it took that long. Next slide, please. Here's the science of making friends. Okay, Elizabeth's book. Next slide, please. I'm just going to show you this quickly because we address our fear and sometimes their fears too, absolutely. Their beliefs and your beliefs. My job is not to change. I've worked with very religious people. I've worked with non-religious people. And so I'm very comfortable My job is not to change that. My job is to help to teach and equip students. And by the way, I think parents are the primary sex educators. I absolutely do. However, they also need a dream team. Absolutely. Like all of my children had dream teams of many people who helped them. And we get more comfortable. We get more comfortable. And I'm glad you're bringing up concerns. We as parents or teachers have concerns, absolutely, and need to talk about them and see strategies that would work for us. Next slide, please. Facts of Life and More. This is Leslie's book, of course, The Birds and Bees. When they used to say this, when I was really young, birds and bees, and I didn't get it until much later. So we have to be clear. Thank you, Lourdes. Be clear. Next slide, please. And so sometimes it's the mamas that are delegated to teach, the mamas, which are great. That's wonderful. And we need to see, are there spaces where the daddies can also teach, or an uncle or a cousin, especially if they're interested in the opposite sex. So could there be those conversations? Next slide, please. And here's a very awful, that didn't come out too well, but these are strategies for students who are on the autism spectrum. Next slide, please. And here's just difficulties. There can be frustration. I'm not going to read every word. There can be fear. There can be emotional sensitivities. I've been with students that are like jumping from, a lot of words or suddenness. And so we've had to look at, okay, how can we keep them in that space? And if they are not paying attention, okay, thank you, Lourdes. Patience, bringing it back, maybe showing something else to bring it back. Maybe that's not the right time. We'll do this again. There's been difficulty adjusting to change. Absolutely, there can be. And so we have to have the patience. And thank you, Lourdes, for saying you reward what they are getting. Oh, yes, thank you, thank you. Thank you for not going outside without clothes on. Right, thank you. You remembered, thank you. Next slide, please. And we have social skills. This is Elizabeth and Fred's book for teenagers as well. Next slide, please. And oh yeah, well here's some things that if a parent or a teacher or anybody saw them as asexual, not able to make decisions, well, and then there's babies, and we got to think about that because a lot of people are concerned. We got to talk about that. If they're pitied, and when people go through bullying, we have to, that's a part of it. How do we address and help our students when they are bullied or when they're ridiculed? What do we do? And how can we talk about that? But also, can they talk to other people who've gone through that? Any kind of bullying. And that's, of course, being addressed in many ways now. Next slide, please. And you can see this is why I'm very serious about this, that abuse can happen if they're not taught. Nope, nope, nope. This is the only person that touches my privates, she said. And she had listed her aunt that she lived with and the doctor. That was it. That was it. Next slide, please. By the way, I was working while we're getting on that there, and so there's the circles. If you're familiar with Stanfield materials, this is still the circles that a lot of people use. A lot of people use. Who's, where do I touch myself in private? Where do I give a hug, a faraway hug? Well, now we're giving virtual hugs, handshakes, waves. And this is very hard because when I taught in special classes, we could teach this and somebody would walk in and they go, okay. And so I said, well, wait a minute. And so I had them pick. And I asked people, this is the hardest thing, is to also ask family members and friends to help us. Please do not just go as much as you would like to, or I'd like to. Could you please help me because we're teaching our students about appropriateness and strategies for safety. It's very hard for some people, but this is the stand field. Next slide, please. And you can see if they are dependent or physical or emotional or financial or nonverbal, you can see where we need, or non-credible. I worked with a student who was very, savvy online, and somebody saying, "You're so cute, you're so hot, I want to come to your house." Well, this particular, what's your address? We had taught this student, and she said, "I want you to meet my mom. My mom's here." Well, boom, person was off the screen, because we had to teach, not don't ever go on, because we're not going to be with them all the time. But if somebody you don't know, and how do you know really?
Marilyn,
Yes.
I really hate to stop you.
We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
Shelley, we're at 5 of 12.
Yes, let's just,
So,
I'll tell you what, go real
Just
fast.
to be
Let's
mindful of
not
the
start,
time.
yeah. Yep, let's not
I'd like
start on this
to
one.
just kind of, you have a wealth of knowledge and information. I would just like to open it up for any questions or comments to you and to Lourdes
And to Lourdes. And also,
as we wrap it up for the day.
and can we look at another slide? I don't want to end on this slide. Can we go to the
Okay,
next
the
slide?
last slide is the best, right?
That's
The
a
last
good,
one.
yeah. And so next slide, please. You're going to see, next slide, please, about touch. Next slide, please. I'm going to go, here it is, boom. There's a good
Perfect.
slide. There's a good slide. These are the 8 types of intimacy. And I was working with some teenagers. And sometimes, I just want to say here, sometimes people said, "Oh, I want to do sex." But what they were talking about was kind of like dancing together close. And they thought that was sex. So I just want to say we had to really look at these 8 types of intimacy. By the way, it's great. And thank you. Keep me on track, Shelley. I want to know, because some people have said, I don't like the word special needs. Can anybody talk about that? Because there have been people who said, don't say that. Maybe people
Well, as a person with a disability, growing up with a disability, most adults don't like that term now, because we don't want to perceive ourselves as special. We're not special. We're not like so unique and different. I mean, we're just like regular people. We have a difference. We have a disability. We're on the autism spectrum. So it's kind of a trend. It's kind of a little touchy subject. I don't know if Jairo's on. Want to speak about that, but yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Marilyn.
No.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely, because I always want to know what people, especially the real experts. You. Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Abigail says it's avoiding saying disability, and it isn't a bad word.
Exactly.
Yes, and so a lot of people are okay. See, and here's Grace saying, I don't mind individual with special needs, but don't like special needs kids. See, everyone has their own, and so I like to see. Do you have a slide with a summary of resources? Yes, actually, that's at the end of this. That's at the end of this whole thing. Okay, keep going. You'll see some more. This is me, and I'm grateful. And here's cultures real fast. Go through it real fast. Different. You can be from the same ethnicity, but age, gender, sex is between your ears. Who you're attracted to. This is your orientation. Here it is. When you're working with students, the biology, chromosomes, hormones, gender identity. I identify male, female, none, both, all, gender role. How do I present, dress, orientation? Who am I attracted to? Which can be very different than gender. Okay, transgender. I've worked with many transgender people, and some of them have many challenges in different ways. I think we all have challenges in different ways. Thank you, Shelby, for saying that. It is very normal to have challenges. Yes.
I think, as you all know, we had envisioned this to be a full day conference. So, thank you all for attending this morning. And we have such a wealth of information with Lourdes and Marilyn. So we're going to be getting you these PowerPoints for sure. And let us know what else you want to learn about. You know, I would love that, because we would love to do this part 2 on sexuality and dating, because there's so much to talk about.
That is part
And
2. Thank you. Thank you. Shelley, can I interrupt just one? There was a
yes.
slide where 2 people were hugging. And I just wanted to show you, I don't know if you can go back or we don't have time, but they were hugging not in the way that people always, they were hugging by not putting their arms around each other, because that was their comfort space. And so even some things like that is so minutely and critically important. All
In
right.
terms of hugs too, that's kind of funny because we learned to do side huggies.
Yeah, side hugs. Yeah,
Side
yeah,
hugs.
yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
side hugging.
yeah. I like that too. Okay.
So
Mhm.
I'd like to thank our speakers, Lourdes and Marilyn, for spending the morning with us. You are a wealth of knowledge, and as you can see, we have so many questions and comments that we definitely need a part 2. I'd also like to take the time to thank the planning committee for this, coming from our Lifespan Interprofessional Collaborative, Dr. Larry Friedman, Christina Saduth, Jairo Arana, and Rosaline Antal, who puts all of these webinars together. Couldn't do it without our dream team at the Mailman Center. And thank you, Dr. Danny Armstrong and Michelle Chaudon, who are leaders at the Mailman Center. So we learned so much this morning. And please,
So much for having
what
me.
else you would like to learn, right, Marilyn and Lourdes? We want
yes.
to do this again.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes. I would. Stars to everybody. This is sign language for stars, stars, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. Thank you. So bye, you guys. So we'll be in touch until